Welcome back. We have lots of breaking news out of Washington. Let's get down to Eamon Javers for the details. Eamon?
Kelly, there's a lot going on here. The first thing is that a federal judge up in Boston has now issued a temporary injunction blocking that so-called fork in the road effort by Elon Musk and the DOGE team to offer a deferred resignation to federal employees in September. The deadline for accepting that offer was supposed to be today, but now the federal judge is saying that at least until Monday, that offer is going to be suspended, giving both sides in a lawsuit over the issue a chance to marshal their arguments and the judge a chance to hear them all out. There was a lawsuit filed by federal employee unions, and the unions were arguing that this was not only unfair but illegal under what's called the Anti-Deficiency Act, which means that the federal government can't obligate any funds that haven't been appropriated by Congress. The judge saying he's going to take his time to look through all those issues. So this will be held up at least until Monday, and federal employees are now expected to get a notice from their employers telling them that the fork in the road so-called offer is now on hold, I guess is the best way to put it, until Monday. Separately, NBC News is reporting that about 60,000 people have already accepted that offer. Unclear what this new temporary injunction means for those folks, but at least some interest among the federal workforce to take that offer. And then thirdly, I just want to update you on a Wall Street Journal article that just posted a couple of minutes ago. The White House is preparing an order, the Journal reports, for thousands of federal health workers to be laid off. The Wall Street Journal is saying that the White House is working on an executive order to fire thousands of U.S. Department of Health and Human Services workers. Under the order, the FDA, Centers for Disease Control, and other health agencies would have to cut a certain percentage of employees. So we'll wait for confirmation from the White House on that, Kelly. But clearly the efforts to pare back the federal workforce are moving ahead on some fronts, even as the federal judge now is issuing this temporary injunction holding off the overall fork in the road effort to cull the federal workforce down to a much smaller size. Back over to you.
To put it differently, Eamon, we could say there's nothing standing in the way of layoffs, although maybe the union to some extent. So if they don't allow the buyout offer to move forward, then we could see more layoffs as a result.
Yeah, we could, although I would imagine the unions will fight those layoffs too. Remember, this is not like a private company, Kelly. There's federal civil service protections for individual employees. Those rules have been in place for over a century, and they're there to prevent presidents from coming into office and then staffing the federal government with all their supporters and friends and allies and donors and stuff like that. That was a big problem in the 1800s. They stopped doing that, gave federal workers these federal civil service protections, which made it very hard for a president to fire individual workers and replace them with political people. So traditionally, only the top people inside the federal government change over in every administration. Those are the so-called political people inside the federal administration.
Right.
Under them is the vast civil service. Those are the career people, and those always stay. This now is an effort to get at that vast number of career employees, and you're going to see, I think, a lot of fight from the federal employee unions to try to push back on all of that.
No, that history is illuminating because it's ironic that the careerism has become a political fight when it was established to avoid political favoritism in the first place.
It was originally a good government effort, right, to get rid of cronyism and corruption in government. Now there are people who say that's gone too far and you can't fire federal employees easily enough, and it's time for an update on that. But these sort of vast sweeping things that Elon Musk and the DOGE team are considering are going to run into some legal hurdles, and you're seeing now the unions and others fighting back with these lawsuits. Ultimately, the courts are going to be determinative here about how far the DOGE team is able to go in paring back the federal workforce, and then also how many people simply decide they want to take the offer. As we said, NBC is reporting 60,000 people have already said yes. That's not huge relative to the size of the federal government, but it does indicate some people are saying, okay, I'll hang it up for 8 months of free pay.
I've heard many are a little spooked by some of these questions about how exactly this would work. Eamon, appreciate it very much. Eamon Javers in Washington.
Two federal government employee unions and the Alliance for Retired Americans are suing the government efficiency cost-cutting team led by tech billionaire Elon Musk. NPR's Bobby Allen reports the suit claims Musk is illegally accessing the personal information of government workers and taxpayers.
DOGE is analyzing payment systems at the Treasury Department. Elon Musk calls some of Treasury's trillions of dollars in annual payments criminal, though on what basis is not clear. Now, a lawsuit is asking a court to block DOGE's Treasury access, saying Social Security Security and disability benefits, tax returns, and the private information of federal government employees are at risk. Lawyer Noam Eisen is representing the plaintiffs.
We filed a lawsuit to say, hands off. You can't have my data. You can't have my spouse's data. You can't have my kids' data. That information is too precious.
President Trump has said Musk's work has required the explicit approval of the White House. Bobby Allen, NPR News.
We're going to begin with the latest moves by the Trump administration, offering a mass buyout to federal employees with a warning that the jobs could be cut if the buyouts aren't taken. It's also facing backlash over its freeze on spending for billions of dollars in federal programs and challenges in court. A federal judge has temporarily blocked the freeze pending further review. Chief White House correspondent Mary Bruce starts us off. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, George. Well, President Trump is moving at a breakneck pace to reshape the federal government and root out what he calls the deep state, this morning taking unprecedented steps to push out people and programs that aren't in lockstep with his agenda. This morning, more than 2 million federal employees are facing a choice: resign and be paid until the end of September, or risk being fired. In an email with the subject line, "Fork in the Road," those interested in the buyout told to reply with one word: resign, and given until February 6th, just 8 days. There are a few exceptions, including military personnel, postal staff, and immigration and national security officials. The plan designed not just to trim the federal budget, but to ensure a workforce that is reliable, loyal, and trustworthy, according to the email, which also says workers who do lose their jobs will be treated with dignity and afforded the protections in place for such positions. The largest union representing federal employees says it's not a voluntary buyout, but a purge.
No one could believe that this is a good faith offer and should know that, it's a fast track to federal workers being ripped.
And this morning, Trump's plan to halt potentially billions of dollars in federal assistance has been placed on hold. A federal judge temporarily pausing a White House order to freeze federal grants and loans, possibly impacting millions of Americans just minutes before it took effect. The White House immediately sparking confusion and panic after it announced plans to pause and review funding for federal assistance programs, potentially impacting everything from disaster relief to free school lunches and Head Start programs for hundreds of thousands of children. Helene Groves is an educator at Campfield Early Learning Center in Baltimore County.
It seems that our most vulnerable populations are the ones who are suffering the most at the with these executive orders.
The White House is defending the move, saying the review is needed to save money and root out programs that run counter to Trump's priorities, like climate change initiatives or diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. But the broad directive sparked confusion, even at bigger programs like Medicaid, which provides health insurance for 72 million low-income Americans. States reporting they couldn't access the Medicaid online portal, instead receiving a warning about possible payment delays due to executive orders regarding potentially unallowable grant payments. The White House saying payments are still being processed and sent, and insisting programs that provide direct benefits to Americans will not be impacted, including Medicaid and also Medicare, Social Security, and federal food assistance. But questions remain about funding handed out to states and organizations that's passed along to people in need. There certainly are lots of organizations that receive funding and then may pass along a benefit. Meals on Wheels, for one. They provide meals for over 2.2 million seniors. What is the president's message to Americans out there, many of whom supported him and voted for him, who are concerned that this is going to impact them?
Again, direct assistance will not be impacted. Becky Heimer.
Direct assistance, Caroline. It's going to another organization and then trickling down.
Direct assistance that is in the hands of the American people will not be impacted.
An offer from the Trump administration raising major questions for federal workers, offering them a chunk of change to quit their jobs in an effort to shrink the federal government. The buyout letter went to millions of employees across the country, including here in New Mexico. News 13's Marilyn Upchurch heard from a federal workers union here in the state. Marilyn?
The email that was sent to federal employees across the country says those who leave will receive about 8 months of salary, but they have to make a decision by next week. A local union says that's too soon.
And that's really one of the biggest concerns that we're hearing, is that there's such a short time for them to make this what could be a very life-changing experience for the employees and their families.
Sue Parton is the president of the Federation of Indian Service Employees, which represents agencies under the Department of Interior, where they represent teachers, cooks, janitors, bus drivers, and more. Parton says many of those in her union are confused about President Trump's so-called deferred resignation offer for federal workers, with employees expected to decide by February 6th.
They're asking questions, well, if I don't resign, but I would like to transfer to another work site, is that part of this buyout? Or if I get in the middle of it and I change my mind, am I allowed to do that?
This email was sent out on Tuesday to federal workers nationwide. It says for those who accept the buyout, they will be exempt from work until September 30th, at which point their employment will officially end, meaning they will get almost 8 months of pay. If workers decide to stay, the majority of federal employees who have been working remotely since COVID will be expected to return to working in person.
Some of them were hired in positions that were advertised as remote positions.
The federal government employed more than 3 million people as of November, according to Pew Research. According to federal data, there were more than 25,000 federal employees in New Mexico as of 2023. Union reps across the country have been raising concerns not only about the impact of workers accepting the buyout, but also job security for those who stay.
They are going to demand that federal employees be loyal and trustworthy. And if not, that they will be targeted for, be penalized up to removal.
My concern is not only the employees, but how it will impact our Native communities throughout the country, but particularly here in New Mexico.
The deferred resignation is available to all full-time federal employees except for those in the military, U.S. Postal Service, or those in immigration enforcement. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Marilyn. The American Federation of Government Employees released a statement saying, in part, purging the federal government of dedicated career civil servants will have vast unintended consequences that will cause chaos for the Americans who depend on a functioning federal government.
Tonight, federal employees are sharing their concerns about the Trump administration's voluntary buyout program.
Investigative reporter Matt Fleener is in Leavenworth tonight speaking with federal union leaders.
There is a lot of care and remembrance for veterans here at the Leavenworth VA Medical Center, but there's also some concern for employees that work inside those gates. The leadership of the American Federation of Government Employees in Leavenworth covers 5 federal facilities under the VA. The union's administration says it's standing up to concerns coming from Washington, D.C. under President Trump's new proposal for resignations. The union says it's hearing from employees day and night about their questions and concerns, and they want to stand up for their employees' rights.
Most federal workers are related to people who aren't federal workers. And all you have to do is ask somebody. We work just as hard as anybody else, and right now we're having to work a little bit harder.
As the work continues here at the VA 24/7, we've also reached out to the Kansas congressional delegation to get their responses to this resignation and buyout offer. We'll have more of that coming up tonight on KMBC. Matt Fleener, KMBC 9 News.
The Kansas City Metro has roughly 40,000 federal employees with a combined payroll of around $3 billion.
Welcome back to Union Base, where we focus on AI, unions, and the future of work. There's a ton of news that's happened this week in regards to the Trump administration and the Department of Government Efficiency, a new agency created by the Trump administration. In this talk, we'll be discussing lawsuits against the Trump administration and DOGE, and we'll provide full links to the lawsuits in the description below. So remember to like and subscribe to this video, and also subscribe to our newsletter at unionbase.com for exclusive updates. The American Federation of Government Employees, or AFGE, alongside SEIU and the AFL-CIO, is escalating its legal battle against the Trump administration over aggressive workforce reductions. In fact, they made offers for workers across the federal government to quit even at the CIA. So as a part of these controversial buyouts to federal employees, the Department of Government Efficiency has gotten unprecedented access to sensitive federal data, including at the Treasury, U.S. Treasury, and that is really making a lot of people nervous and angry. Central to this clash are voluntary buyouts being pushed by the administration, targeting federal employees across agencies. These buyouts, framed as financial incentives for early retirement, are sparking outrage from the unions, who argue that the offers are designed to shrink the federal government workforce without transparency or accountability. Now, AFGE's president, Everett Kelly, warns the move is a backdoor attempt to hollow out critical agencies, leaving remaining employees overburdened and vital services from Social Security Administration to environment oversight at risk. This shouldn't be a surprise given that the Trump administration said it was going to do these things, and people pretty much knew what they were voting for. Separate to this conversation, USAID has been shut down, and that's a conversation for another video. May not have as much relevance in terms of unions, but something worth paying attention to. But anyway, the buyouts are just one front in this fight. The administration's simultaneous hiring freezes and proposed layoffs of civil servants have drawn fierce opposition. Quote, "This isn't fiscal responsibility, it's sabotage," Kelly said, accusing officials of prioritizing privatization over the public good. Unions allege the staffing cuts violate federal worker protections and could destabilize agencies already stretched thin. The legal firestorm, however, now centers on DOGE. Emails obtained by unions reveal that employees at the Labor and Treasury departments were pressured to grant DOGE, project led by Elon Musk, unrestricted access to systems containing Americans' social security numbers, tax records, medical histories, and more. One whistleblower claims staff were told to fast-track DOGE's request or face disciplinary action, bypassing mandatory privacy protocols. Quote, "This is a 5-alarm crisis," Kelly stated, noting that DOGE operatives lack proper security clearances and that they're exploiting these buyouts and layoffs to replace career professionals with unvetted corporate actors. The union's lawsuits filed in federal court this week demand injunctions to block DOGE's data access and halt buyout program, arguing violations of the Privacy Act, Federal Advisory Committee Act, and federal workforce laws. Critics tie the administration's actions to Project 2025, a conservative blueprint to rapidly dismantle and privatize federal operations. This isn't just about efficiency, it's about eroding trust in the government itself. For federal workers, the stakes are very personal. Many are facing impossible choices to take buyouts or risk being laid off later. And one Treasury employee who requested to remain anonymous said it's a tactic to silence dissent and clear path for privatization. As these battles play out in court, Union Base will keep you informed. So as I said before, scroll down for direct links to lawsuits challenging the buyouts, layoffs, and DOGE's data access. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. Now, one thing I will note before we leave here is that there's going to be a lot of news happening over the next 4 years. Not only in terms of the Trump administration, but in terms of AI developments and advancements. And we plan to keep you updated on all that stuff. So just tune in here and let us know if you have any questions in the comments. Thank you.